Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to another episode of Islam for Europeans and technically Milahan Philosopher's Corner because now she will be interviewing me. A couple of weeks ago, I interviewed her regarding her channel. Please like and subscribe to Milahan Philosopher's Corner. But now she's gonna be the firing squad.
Yes.
So I'm glad to have Sister Milahan back on. How are you doing, Sister Milahan?
Pretty good, pretty good. I got my matcha latte I made for special for this occasion. Have you ever tried matcha?
I
It's a
have once or
ground green
twice.
tea.
Yeah, I have once or twice. Yeah, it is a very interesting taste. Me being from Canada, I like my Tim Hortons iced cap, but
Ah,
matcha is I could see why people like it. It's a very interesting taste.
good, good. So you know it's going to be a special occasion when I got the fancy coffee type of drinks out, you know.
Yes.
So tell me about Islam for Europeans. What's it all about? What's your mission statement?
So Islam for Europeans is an organization that is run by Muslims of European descent. I've been the front man of Islam for Europeans since 2017. And basically, our mission statement is that uh, Muslims from any converts, basically from any background, whether for wherever their origins are, they always belong to a community, and those communities are going to be overwhelmingly non-Muslim, and the best way, both in the pre-modern Islamic era and in the contemporary era, for converts to not only survive but also thrive is if they collectivize into a wolf pack. And we can look at the group conversions of various peoples throughout Islamic history. We can look at the success of the Zotzil Muslims in Chiapas, Mexico. We can look at undoubtedly the success of our African American brothers and sisters in the United States. And we believe that a major reason for this is that Allah created all of us. He created everything that exists. He created human beings. So in terms of the Muslim Ummah, yes, we are all one Ummah. But at the same time, we're not one community. And I think that, whenever a communitarian approach has been taken by the people who convert to Islam, they're far more successful because, they interact every day with their own people. They have their own particular cultural aesthetics, ways of doing, cuisine, dress, architecture. And when you have, Muslims coming from other countries into a non-Muslim country, to the non-Muslim populace, Islam seems very foreign to them. And the best remedy for that is if the converts from that group collectivize, and so they can organize themselves, largely take care of their own affairs, and then you naturally see this cultural synthesis of their culture within Islam. Just getting rid of the degenerate aspects. And we've never suggested to separate ourselves from the greater Muslim community. Far from it. We do believe that we should all hold the rope of Allah together. But each community, they come with their own challenges, their own problems, their own issues, and it's best when the people who have those particular issues organize and work on those problems together as a whole. So that's what we're suggesting, not just for Europe proper, but also European descent peoples who have converted to Islam in the Western outpost countries, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, South Africa, United States. So that's basically what we're about.
Fascinating. Okay, and have you established any of those places yet, or is still in the mission mode?
Unfortunately, no, we do not have a brick and mortar or edifice for which we run out of Islam for Europeans. We're still in like the nascent, stages where we're working at the theoretical level. We do have members, worldwide. We have members in the UK. We have members in South Africa. We have members in Portugal, Canada, and the United States. But inshallah, we hope one day to have an actual brick and mortar place, that would be the headquarters for Islam for Europeans. So.
Would you think of running it out of like an office type of real estate location or an actual masjid?
I think a hybrid a type of a place would probably be ideal for a couple of reasons. One is that when you're just starting out as a nascent Muslim sub community, you need to get a critical mass of people before you start up. As Islam in the Anglosphere, there are a wide variety of opinions on Islam in the Anglosphere, ranging from highly negative to highly to positive and everywhere in between. But in general, the statistics show that that European descendant or white converts to Islam have very high attrition rates, sadly. So, once we get a collective mass, I think an office space with a musalla in the back would probably be ideal because it's something that's more familiar to not just converts, but also, our family members. And, but at the same time, we want to establish salah. So, and, we would invite every Muslim, like no, we would invite all Muslims to come into this building. If they need to pray, they would pray in the same rows as us. So we're not an exclusionary group, but I think for the time being, an office space with a musalla in the back would probably be the best option.
Would you classify it as like a society, an order? Like
Uh,
there's like different terminologies, like because it's
yeah,
Islam for Europeans, so would you call it the Society of the Islam of Europeans or the Order of the Islam of Europeans? You know what I'm trying to say?
that's a good question. I think no one's ever really posed that to me. It's a great question. I think it sounds cool, for starters. It adds this kind of additional lore to it. Um,
Yeah,
we definitely want to have chapters. When you look at organizations such as the Moose Lodge, the Royal Canadian Legion, they have chapters all throughout the country. So when a new member moves to a new city, they have their card membership. They can walk into a Moose Lodge and feel, right at home with their fellow Moose
exactly. Yeah.
Lodgians. When it comes to, for Islam for Europeans, we'd love to have that where somebody, a white person converts to Islam, boom, there's a Islam for Europeans center right there. The rest of the Muslim community said, hey, you're more than welcome to pray in our masjid. You can come for iftars, but like there's also an organization dedicated to converts such as yourself. So that's that's a good question. I might contemplate that. I like the sound of
Yeah,
that, an
definitely.
order.
Yeah, because it makes it sound because you have your headquarters, like you said, different chapters. You have the order, and then you have the different chapters. And have you created like an official logo?
Yes. You can see the official logo on our YouTube channel and our website. The logo is a Greek style Parthenon style building with 5 pillars, obviously representing the pillars of Islam. Um, it is
Nice.
currently in blue, although I'm thinking of changing it to green or maybe multicolored to represent the flags of the various European countries. So, yes, we do have a logo.
Nice. Okay, good. Yeah. And later when you establish it, it doesn't hurt to have like coffee cups and
Mhm.
I don't know, things like that really help.
Yes, we
Because I
definitely
was
want to
part of
have
like,
swag and merch. Yeah.
yeah, because that helps for unification. Makes
Yes,
people feel like even though they're far away, they still are part of this connected community.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. And so you yourself, for right now, would you call yourself the president?
I would call myself the front man, the face of the organization. Um, it was originally started in Russia by a brother of Vadim Sodorov, and he, started Islam for Europeans in Russia, kind of like with a similar mission.
Mhm.
So I would say he's the president, but for the time being, I'm the front man. So
Okay, so like the PR person?
yes, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, nice. Okay. And so now what stage do you think you're in? You're in the recruiting stage?
Yeah, I would say so. I guess the theoretical stage. We, I knew taking this on that this kind of organization would create a lot of controversy for various reasons. It started, the whole idea of a collectivization of white Muslims started as like a joke by like the far right. You probably heard the meme "white Sharia." Have you ever heard of that movie?
Oh yeah, I have.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I have
So
actually.
yeah, so there were people who were in like the far right who thought of the idea of white Sharia as a joke, basically, and we kind of reject that term because it was basically used as a way to we want to establish our own Sharia, but we're going to kick out all the Muslims. So we're not about that. So we definitely did not get down with that meme, but like it's something that we did keep in the back of their heads that like we're going to have to really think about all the different reactions we're going to get. There's many Muslims who don't think that there should be any subgroup of Muslims whatsoever, that we should just be one gray monocultural blob of an ummah, and anything apart from that is considered division. You also had attacks coming from the far left, who would say, you guys are racist. Then you have attacks coming from the far right, saying, these people are cryptos. So, we have really had to think about, like following the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, being practicing Muslims, before proceeding, because we wanted to be a first-rate organization. We didn't want to be a joke. So, yeah,
Yes. I think it's so when we say European, it's funny how they always assume white because there was a time where people said that Italians were not white,
yeah,
and the Irish and Italians would argue like who's white, and it's fascinating because a Brazilian can be some would call European, and then they come in different shades. I have a lot of neighbors who you would think they're maybe Mexican, but then you see some who look like they're, blonde hair and blue eyes, and even people from Spain. Some of them are more brown and others are actually more blondish. And you're like, wow. So it is funny that they would assume that it automatically means like very pale folk, you know? Eh, you
yeah,
know,
yeah, and that's why we named our organization Islam for Europeans and not Islam for whites.
exactly.
White can be a very loaded term. It's more about the fact that when you come from like a country, in Europe, and you convert to Islam, there's a whole set of challenges associated with that are very unique. And like you said, Southern Italians, Portuguese, Spanish, they have darker skin tones than many Arabs and Asians. So like the struggles are going to be similar. So someone who's a Portuguese Canadian who converts to Islam, even though he or she may be, of darker skin tone, is going to face very similar problems to, like a pale white guy from Scotland. So, I think that's why we named our organization Islam for Europeans. So.
Yes, and to me, when I hear that, I think it sounds wonderful because when I talk to people, sometimes in my family, they'll be like, "But we raised you Christian and you're American," and they seem to think that Islam is a race.
Yeah.
Like, what are you, an Arab now? And it's like, you gonna do Arab face? And I'm like, no, it's not. No, it's not a race. And so, like, I do find this intriguing actually, because if I were to go talk to a sister, like, or sorry, not a sister, but a a, a non-believer, right? And she maybe grew up in Kentucky. Me and her might have a lot of cultural stuff in common, and she may feel like, well, that's for the Middle East. That's not for here. And then if she sees someone from her own path, as I mentioned, earlier in our other previous discussion, that can actually really help. And I think you mentioned how a lot of white reverts or European reverts rather have a difficult time sticking to their deen. It's also interesting because the cultural clashes that are separate from the actual dogma and rites of the religion, the cultural classes are they're very apparent. Even myself, I felt it quite a lot to where I think to myself, I think I have more in common with the disbelievers of my own country than believers of another country.
Yeah.
And why? Because culture plays a huge role. And then when I did more digging, you see that there are people who they're not practicing Muslims, but they're cultural Muslims, which is a weird term. And you're like, huh, this is quite strange. So I don't think it's wrong for uh non-Easterners to have a group where Muslims can come together and have similar histories, you know? Like Christmas isn't maybe really huge in some other countries, but here in America it most certainly is. And when nostalgia comes around in December, it'd be very good for some reavers to have that talk, with someone who knows the struggles of it versus someone who never really grew up with it. They don't have pine trees, they don't have snow. It's not the same sweetness that you felt, the nostalgia when you were a kid, and then having to abandon all of that and start something new, right? So I really hope that something like this gets established, That sounds very intriguing to me. Very
Yeah.
intriguing because that would
Thank you.
actually help if I was trying to talk to my brothers or my sisters, my blood sisters, right? And I'm like, there's this Islam for Europeans, check it out. That would be actually more approachable if you send them someone who is straight from the Middle East and English is their second language and they are culturally different. This might be very like, hey, it's harder. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
Japanese people seem to have their own culture, and I don't mind that at all. The people from Somalia, they have their own culture. We have the same religion, but to pretend like culture doesn't matter sometimes, it's like I feel like you can't actually create a bridge,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. And when you're the only convert in an Islamic environment, or one of many, you're going to have to assimilate just by absorption. And I don't think the Muslim communities who take in these converts are doing anything wrong per se. um, I just think they don't realize it, that like they're gonna have to like follow all these norms that aren't necessarily required in Islam. And that those cultural differences are going to be magnified when it comes to intercultural marriage. Now, I mean, if and there are many converts who marry into another culture, and we're completely. I mean, if it works for them, alhamdulillah. We're not forcing anybody to marry anybody else. There's some situations where converts have to. There's no other choice but to marry into a Muslim family. Um, but I think for many Westerners, um, Muslim communities, mosques, existing Islamic organizations, they're not really designed for handling the problems of converts in general. I would say, and I think a major reason for that is because the only converts that they see are the ones who've already made it. They've already achieved this bar. They're already willing to make hijrah or wear Islamic clothing, marry into a Muslim family, get a high level of Islamic education. And if they can do all that, alhamdulillah, good for them. But, what you do see often in many mosques, and I know this is the situation in Canada, I don't know about the United States, is that you really see a revolving door of converts, and it's sad to see.
Oh,
And I think a lot of the top five problems that we're facing, I did a survey, what the top five problems are, and faced by converts, and all right down the list. I mean, mosques are not really designed to handle any of them. So I don't think this is their fault. Like I said, it's just that not the right mechanism, to
totally.
handle these issues. Yeah.
And so your solution is then to have the Islam for Europeans to fill that void.
Yes, or any, we fully support Islam in Spanish, which is, the first organization for Latino and Latina converts in the United States. We support the Black American Muslim Conference, and we would support any organization of any cultural origin that does not have a large Muslim population for the converts to, organize themselves, whether that's First Nations in Canada or, like you said, the Japanese. An organization like this that can like help ameliorate the convert situation, so they could be healthy members of the Muslim community.
That sounds great.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea and I think it's needed. And even, I saw a post, you mentioned, how the far right is said white Sharia. I saw a post. It was on Twitter/X, and it had a a white Muslim brother, and his wife was in a niqab, and then in the back they had a Confederate flag, and this made so many people mad. Yeah, and I was like, why? But they felt as if you were betraying America if you became a Muslim, and I found that to be reprehensible. You know, you can be from the South and you can be a Muslim. You don't have to be a Christian. You know, and you don't have to dress in a very lewd manner in order to, exist in America. And covering up is not something bad. And I think it would just be a great idea to have some type of organization like that, especially for the children. I think about the children because it's really it's hard for kids who don't, have that type of resource. I think that'd be very important for teen girls as well, and young men who need some guidance, and their like parents are reverts, and I think that would be great. I think that's really needed.
Yeah, like I always want to keep in mind that we have other Muslims coming from different communities. So for an African American Muslim to see that, they would rightly be very offended. So I'm talking about like a Muslim guy with a beard and his niqabi wife with the Confederate flag. I mean, I can understand why our African American brothers and sisters would be totally repulsed by that. Um, you know, but at the same time, in general, we get a lot of support from the African American Muslim community. I think that this is something that we should be doing. And honestly, like if you think about it, um, you
And there's a
know,
lot of blacks in France now.
uh,
Like
yeah,
there's a lot of black people who live in France, so they would be and they're like second generation, so they would be considered European culturally. You
in
know
a
what I
way,
mean?
yes, but I think that their situation is still different. But like and the largest difference is that their entire families are Muslims, right? For people of French descent who convert to Islam, their entire families are French non-Muslims. So the reaction is going to be much more different. I mean, even the struggle of a convert is going to be different than a born Muslim. And that's not to say that to be exclusionary. I'm just saying that their struggle and their situation is going to be very far more different than a French person who converts to Islam. Um, but at the same time, like I again we're doing this because because we want to survive and thrive as Euro converts, but B also for the whole image of Islam in the West. If you have a healthy French uh, native French Muslim community in France, no matter how small it is, and they see that they're having families and they're having a synthesis of the halal aspects of French culture, well, whatever's left. Uh, then and
Yeah,
they see
right.
the rest of uh, the black Muslims in France. If they see them as encouraging that, then this would completely flip the image of Islam in Europe. Because part of the reason why there's such a backlash against Islam in Europe is because of demographic change. Like they
Yeah.
feel that they're being replaced. Um, and they're like immigration in general, not all of them are Muslims. Many of them come from India. They come from China. But at the same time, if they see that Islam is actually increasing their numbers, then this would completely flip the script on the image of Islam in the West. So, we want to use that
Very
as a
true.
bargaining chip, for the safety and security of all Muslims who are currently living in Europe and the West in general. So,
I think that's a great idea. It's plausible. You can do it. I think that's totally something practical, approachable, and reasonable.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like, I don't know why people haven't thought of it sooner. uh,
Yeah.
but like, because and again, we don't advocate allying, quote unquote, allying with the far right. One, because I don't want to get fired. uh, I don't want to get I don't want a white van following me. But at the same time, we have to realize that the right is in schism now. You have the anti-Islam right, and this is the only side of the right that Muslims really see. Your Tommy Robinsons and your, um,
Nick
apostate
Fuentes.
prophet David Wood. Like this is like the anti-Islam faction of the right. Jordan Peterson. And then you have the dissident right, you know, your Nick Fuenteses and your Keith Woods. They're looking at the problem in Europe as, from a racial perspective, but their
And there's
thoughts
a
on it.
lot of females too who are against Islam that I used to like. There was Lauren Southern, Sydney Watson.
Yeah,
There's just too many of them, and they didn't. I didn't know their past histories of expressing it, and then later they express it, and you're like, oh. So
yeah,
there's just quite a number of Elijah Schaffer as well, Matt Walsh.
yeah,
The entire Daily Wire actually.
yeah,
You know, you're like, wow. So this is strange,
yeah.
and I do think Islam for Europeans, that type of mission, that type of philosophy, that type of approach could definitely be part of the counterculture.
Yes, yeah, and I think we've gained a lot of support from Muslims who are part of like the counterculture. They see that the way the Muslim communities have been trying to solve these all these political issues has been in the last 15 years, last 8 years especially, was to ally with the left, and that, as you know, that has proved to be an absolute disaster.
Oh yeah,
We've compromised our
absolutely.
values, and
Yes,
non-Muslims just see us as sellouts now. But allying with the right is not going to be feasible either, because the right is always going to be pro-establishment, and they're not going to they're not going to shake hands with people who hold an illiberal ideology, and they're in direct conflict with the type of foreign policy they want to run. So Muslims are really caught between a rock and a hard place.
very true.
This is like an outside the box solution that is going to, inshallah, dissipate anti-Islam sentiment in the West.
Inshallah. So do you want to have like teachers and like uh club organizers? Like if you want to establish that, you got to start recruiting people to work,
Yeah.
like to actually like be part of that, because you got to get administrators, set up the bureaucracy a little bit. And have you done some of that yet, or
Not at all. It's like we really lack funding. And like you said, once you start doing these things, it's going to take a lot of manpower, working power, and brothers and sisters who want to take on the mission. It's going to require a lot of organization. So that's going to be no small feat. So we're not at that point yet, but inshallah, one day there's hoping that we do get funding and people who want to take on this endeavor. So
so you're what you're looking for now is like fundraising opportunities?
yes, yes, exactly. I mean, like with basic funding, you know, um, we can produce more materials. Like we want to produce pamphlets.
Have
Uh,
you set up like a Patreon or a Subscribe Star?
that's something that we should be doing. Yeah, I want to write all this down. Any
You
other
should do
method?
that.
Yeah, for sure, to gain
'Cause
funding.
that's the new, like, you have a Cash App, a Venmo, Subscribe Star, Patreon, PayPal.
Mhm.
Get all those set up, and then I liked this idea. I used to read in the history books how these monasteries used to have little farms, and they would actually sell like sheep and chicken eggs and meat and honey hives and stuff. They actually would have land that they used to help pay for the things that they needed. And so I'm a little that's a little bit more out there, but that's something that is a cool self-sustainable model where you have products and then the members are can be like a commune and kind of help. You also have paid employees, but you have volunteers, and then the kids get to be around the sheep or the chicken coop, and you go to a farmer's market, you sell your products, you use that revenue to fund your programs and to put it back into your area. I've seen a lot of quite a lot of Christians do that in America
Yeah,
in the past, but also like there's community people who do that. Like I'll buy baby blankets from some of the old ladies who, they'll sell them, they give half to their church, and then the Mormons are really good at fundraising.
mhm.
Their fundraising models.
Mhm.
And I think that's something interesting. Now, tithing is different, but I still think that the fundraising models of other places, there's something to be there. And you can also host events. Once you get your spot, invite certain speakers, and then, have like a $5 entrance fee, $1 entrance fee, something like that, and then you use that capital that you gained and then put it back into the business. So hosting events, also hosting feasts, like catered dinners, where like you hire somebody, or the women. If you were in California, I would totally be like, I'll cook you up a storm.
Mhm.
You don't have to pay me. I just like cooking.
Right.
Like where people come in, they can eat, have a buffet, there's a speaker, you have an event, that's also a way to raise money. I did fundraising for the Honor Society, and for Alpha Gamma Sigma, and I did all kinds of stuff for fundraising, bake sales. So I'm really into that type of thing. And it's not, once you get like a little location, or first get your digital stuff, because that is easy in this day and age. People just press a button,
Yeah.
and then have your ambassadors. You got to get your ambassadors going.
Yeah.
And then
Absolutely.
once you get your ambassadors, like imagine you had an ambassador like in each county in California. How powerful would that be?
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely. And like I think a lot of what we're about, because again we're starting at the theoretical stage. A lot of people would ask, why do something like this? And I think there's the backlash to it. Like we have to look at the seer of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the Sunnah. And is this a new idea? Is this like something that we're just pulling out of our hat, or is there a basis for this in Islam? And I think I'm saying this because there's still a lot of mainstream opposition or knee-jerk reaction when we talk about these type of ideas. Like I was talking to one well-known like uh, a Muslim convert brother who's been Muslim for a very long time, and he's very successful. He's very well known on YouTube, and I explained to him, just basic things about for example, the fact that converts have a high dropout rate, upwards of like sometimes 70%, unfortunately,
Yeah.
or that many of these intercultural marriages end in divorce. And he
Hmm.
looked at me like I had three heads. Like he had no idea what I was talking about. He thought it was absolutely crazy, that this is an idea is going to turn into a cult. So like that, I think big problem is we don't have a lot of statistical data, and that's something we also want to do, is statistical research to show that this is something that is needed. But also the fact that when you look at Islam in the pre-modern era, like this kind of natural synthesis of the culture within Islam was just normal, because migration was rare. The Muslims would go to a new country, they may have conquered that country, and within a generation, the converts from that region basically superseded the converts that had immigrated there. So it didn't have this huge effect on the culture, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think people realize that. I think that mainstream Islamic organizations, they still kind of balk at this idea, and that's why I'm in the process of writing a book, actually, in Milahan. I think the book is going to be essential because it's going to outline, why are we doing this? Like what's the point? Because if you don't, I think what's going to happen is that you're going to get some people who join, but for the wrong reasons, and you're also going to get a lot of people who are going to be opposed to what you do. So I think that that's important before moving forward, before getting all the funding, I think.
Yeah. Write your book, get that going. But I would say that everything that's daring and worth happening is going to have pushback no matter what.
Yes.
And anti-whiteism, anti-Europeanness, anti-Westernism, these are things that are popular right now and get a lot of views.
Yeah.
So one must remember, in the game of social media, some people rage bait just for monetization revenue, and they're not really sincere. And so you have to just let them bark because they're just trying to get a payday. That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
A lot of people make up controversy because they need ad revenue and they got to get clicks, and they're not content creators, they're reactionaries. and so they need something to complain about for the day, otherwise they're not gonna get paid, and they got rent. So I wouldn't let these uh habitual contrarians harness your energy in a way you don't want it,
Yeah.
because that's just very common right now. That's a job. People get paid to be trolls, and you know, there's people who you even can pay to like your posts, or they make all kinds of stuff for you to make something easier for you to share your stuff. There are all these schemes.
Mhm.
So you might think you get like, for example, some people start pushing back. It could be the same person with 5 stock accounts.
Mm,
These are very plausible things in the AI era.
mhm.
So if you feel in your soul that this is going to help Muslims, then I would say go for it and trust in Allah and be ready to bear whatever the reward or punishment is on Judgment Day. That's how
Yeah,
I see it,
that's a
you
good
know?
that's a good way. That's great advice, Milahan, and I definitely want to take that advice. Like I went to like an all white. I grew up in an all white town. Basically, it was 95% white. I went to an all mostly white grade school and high school, Catholic school, and like looking back, I'm like, man, I wish that like my crew, my classmates, people in my town, had we been Muslim, and even just halfway practicing, you know,
Yeah.
how much more successful would we have been, like because white Canadians have a particular culture, like we our ancestors emigrated to this country. Um, you know, some of the natives we didn't treat very well. Others we did. Others we consolidated with native groups. The Quebecois they intermarried with the natives and became the Métis. Like and we invented a lot of stuff, and we produced our own culture that's very identifiable. Hockey, curling, Tim Hortons. Well, it's not Molson Canadian, but that's not halal. And I think like I wish that I could give that to my people, and not just for them, but for the whole Muslim community at large. And I think it's sad that these cultures have just kind of disappeared and just melded into this global monoculture that is just consuming us all. It's just really sad to see. But I
Yeah.
mean, that gives me hope. It really does. I mean, I wouldn't give this up for the world. All the painful experiences I went through, 21 years of being a Muslim, is all have all culminated in me being in this position. And alhamdulillah, I wouldn't give it up for the world. And I feel in my heart of hearts, that this is going to be the best thing, for Islam in the West.
Good. Then you're on something important. You know,
Inshallah.
I, I, I've heard all kinds of different groups. They all have their niche, and the way you prevent it from being a cult is just that, like you said, you bring it back to the Quran and Sunnah. But I don't think it's wrong. If someone says, "Why do this?" I would argue, "Well, why not?" Why can't someone like their culture and also be a Muslim and then want to be around people sometimes who understand their plight? I had spoken to one sheikh who was from Saudi, and he didn't understand the cultural plight I was talking about, and it was so frustrating. And I was just like, this is what am I going to do? They don't understand the plight.
Mm,
And it was it was very disheartening. So I don't think it's wrong to say you want to find some, like, depending on what you're seeking, if you want to find someone to like something, like
mm,
you need help on a certain topic. Like, okay, I've had moms come to me and say, "Can you talk to my daughter? She's being rebellious. She's having problems in school." That's a cultural thing that we're familiar with. Okay. But like they came to me because we're the same culture. We're the same culture. So I know how to talk to somebody who's in that, like, who went through the trials of youth similar to mine, right? The American condition. I
mm,
know the American condition. And so it's easier for me to empathize and create solutions based on our region, what we're going through, right? If I was to talk to someone in China, we would have some like areas generalities, but there's specific things that they need that I can't know because I haven't lived that life. So I see
Yes.
nothing wrong with arguing with the point that Islam for Europeans decides to have a mission where it's Eurocentric and it has a link of culture, and that's just very important, you know,
Well, like,
very important.
yeah, thank you for that, really. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's it's very it can be very alienating being a convert to Islam, especially a white convert. And like everyone else is from a different culture, and they don't really understand all the struggles that we go through, the loneliness, the managing the relationship with your non-Muslim family and friends, the steep learning curve, like just basic things as um like I remember one time they had an open house years ago at the mosque, and
Uh-huh.
they had it on a Sunday in February, and they were going to spend a lot of money on it. And a couple weeks before the open house, I look at the calendar, I'm just like, that date looks familiar. So it was on the same day as the Super Bowl, right? So
Oh,
so me and
uh,
I called up my convert friend. I'm like, we can't have the open house on this day. Nobody's gonna come, because like the Super Bowl is like, as you know, it's like a holiday. Like,
yeah,
people
my grandpa
travel.
would always make a little feast on the coffee table, and that was like a big thing.
Yeah, so we talked to the Islamic board, and in Canada, you have to understand, like, it's not like the United States. You may have many African American Muslims who are nth gen Americans, but Canada's the masajid are overwhelmingly run by immigrants, and we tried to explain this to them, like, look, you can't have the open house on this day. The Super Bowl is a very busy day. People are cooking, they're traveling, and like, no, 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 it'll be fine. And then nobody came, and like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
frustrating because they don't get this, and other things too. Like, I remember one time we had an open house and we had a table set up in the lobby, and there were two brothers greeting everybody. Now, before the open house, we said, we're very strict about following the sunnah in terms of not shaking hands with the opposite gender,
Yeah.
right? So, but the lobby had a table with two brothers, and you know what? I talked to some other brothers about this. I'm just like, look, maybe what we should have are two tables, one table with two brothers and another table with two sisters, because
Exactly.
when the non-Muslims come in, at least they're getting a handshake. Everybody, like
Yeah,
the
because
women will.
handshaking for job interviews, I remember still today, manager after I interview wants to shake my hand. If I pull back and I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't, I'm Muslim, I may not get the job.
Yeah.
That is something. Handshaking is actually in the corporate world, in the cultural, yeah, that's a huge thing. And so
Yeah.
some women will get highly offended and aggressive. You don't want to ruffle feathers right at the beginning. So
Yeah.
having those two options is a smart, smooth way to shepherd people in without
Yes.
ruffling their feathers right at the beginning.
Yes.
That's yeah. See, that's exactly what I was thinking about. What you were mentioning is these cultural things where you're like, okay, how can you navigate in a halal way in a cultural specific thing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's great. I really do, because I have people who I mentioned, they keep thinking that if you're a Muslim, that means you're masquerading as an Arab, and they just think that you're brainwashed in a weird way. Like, they see Christian, you can be any race. But when it comes to Islam, you have to either, be of the Middle East. It's very interesting because you begin to see how that's a stigma, that's a heavy burden. And I think Islam for Europeans can lighten that burden,
Inshallah.
you know?
Inshallah.
So,
And like this is, there's a basis for this in the Sunnah, that's not really talked about even in Islamic courses. Have you ever heard of the concept of urf in Islam in your readings, Milahan?
not yet, but I do remember about the hadith that talked about the city guy. I'm summarizing. The city person can't represent the Bedouin,
Mm.
the Bedouins' interests. I'm butchering it. It's in Sahih Bukhari, but it was
Oh,
one of,
really? I'd like to see that. I didn't know about that. If you can find that,
yeah,
that'd be great.
yeah, it
Um,
was. I wish I have. I'm trying to memorize all these hadiths. I've read thousands on my channel alone, but
yeah.
it was one that really struck me. And I think we try to find it, it just showed you how different interests, the interests of the Bedouin and concerning commerce and the market, it might be in the section concerning sales and
Mm,
markets,
mm,
because uh, the city person has a different context than the Bedouin,
mhm.
you know, and they're still Muslims, but they have different lifestyles,
Yeah.
different interests,
Yeah.
you know, and so with Islam for Europeans, to me, it just sounds like a cultural thing aiming at to fill the void, to have solutions, to create networks. That should be a good thing.
Yeah.
And I don't, I just feel like it's so wrong for people to think that n- pale folk can't, pale folk of Scotland, Ireland, Italy, France, you name it, Russia, Bulgaria, Hungary, like they can't have any type of specific culture where they feel like they have a community. It's quite strange, but if you have one for for people of Egypt, like if you have one mosque that's like, Egyptian, new immigrant arrivals from Egypt, because we have a lot for the Latin America in California. There's a lot of organizations that help specifically uh the undocumented and documented Latinos of Guatemala, Honduras, and Mexico. They literally have that.
Mhm.
Then they have specific ones for Brazil, and because they help you with immigration lawyers or paperwork or food banks. I just, I don't see why that would be negative, but I guess it is, like I said, it's very popular now to find outrage.
Mhm.
Rage baiting pays, especially on Twitter X. The more interactions you get, the more you're gonna get in revenue, and
Yeah.
they pay out every month.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And I've tried to stay away from rage baiting because there's some white converts I meet that are sometimes very angry at born Muslims, and I try to stay away from that. I try to, like, hold the balance and keep a positive image.
Yeah,
But there's always going to be people like that. But like you said, there's already organizations like, in Canada we have the Syrian Canadian Association, the Pakistani Canadian Association, the Sudanese Canadian Association. They have all these organizations that are designed to help ameliorate new arrivals to Canada, and most of these arrivals come from majority Muslim countries. And for people to turn around and say can't have this kind of organization that's dividing the ummah. Well, I mean, no one has ever called for these other organizations to be dismantled. Like they have specific problems, like you said, immigration papers, getting their driver's license, language training. They have their own social networks. So as you know, like in any metropolitan city in the West, you already have sub communities of Muslims that exist already. They have their own masajid that they run. So it's
E-
hypocritical to say,
even California has Chinatown, Italian Town.
mm,
We're all Californians. We're all living in America, but
mm,
there's little communities.
yeah,
So what's the difference? We don't tell them you can't have Chinatown. Chinatown's a huge tourist attraction. I go get tea there.
yeah,
you know?
exactly,
So they're Chinese American, but they still get to hold on to that cultural identity.
yeah, absolutely. And like I said, in 2024, the global monoculture has really had a negative effect, an atomizing effect on the entire world. And you need something like this. And I think that's why there's such a backlash against it. So like I said, and you mentioned Chinatowns. There's Chinatowns in Toronto, Milahan, maybe like three or four of them in Toronto, and the Muslim community in Toronto has been around for generations. They haven't even made a dent in giving dawah to the Chinese Canadian community. I mean, like, it's a complete vacuum. So it's going to be up to Chinese Canadians themselves, to convert and form their own organizations, to form an Islamic niche within those Chinatowns. You know, uh, Pakistani or Somali Muslim communities, they're not interested in doing that. They don't want to venture out. So
Exactly. And when you come from your own culture, you know the way in.
yeah,
Do you know what I'm trying to say?
yeah,
Like, okay, if you're going to war, you know your own terrain of your own area, right? You know the cooks and crannies, you know the leverage points, you know the weak spots, you know where to fortify and when to gather. The person approaching your new territory doesn't know that.
yeah,
Even in the Art of War of Sun Tzu, it's fascinating because I'm really into like war books. And when you look at like, okay, if you believe that we have to fight against evil until we return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have to do good deeds. Well, if you know your local environment, you're going to know more than the outsider who just got here,
yeah,
who thinks, you know, America is apple pies and has this strange propagandized image they got on the TV.
yeah.
But when you're here and you've lived in the raw, you know the underbelly.
Hmm.
So you know exactly the symptoms and what kind of medicine from the dean to give.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that's actually a brilliant idea. The more I think about it, the more I warm up to it, you know,
Yeah. And a
because
perfect example of this is the fact that mainstream duat have always focused their attention for years on the anti-Islam crowd, and were completely unaware that the dissident right even existed. It wasn't until recently when a few like Daniel finally interviewed someone from the dissident right, and he thought he was like an anti-Islam liberal. So he came in with all these talking points, assuming he was talking to like a David Wood, and the guy was like, I think you got the wrong person.
I
And
mean, brother Daniel Haikikachu,
yes, yes.
I've watched all his debates. Or which debater are you talking about? Do you remember
Well,
their
his
name?
first, well, the first mistake that he made was that he interviewed Mark Collette first. Now, Mark Collette
Hmm.
is the head of Patriotic Alternative, but he's a politician and he lives in the UK. And you know, he didn't do his research. He could have called me up and say, Rob, I need help with this. Tell me all about this guy, and I could have given like a breakdown. But like you said, like if you don't know the territory, you're going to make these mistakes. And after Daniel learned his lesson, the next person he interviewed was Jean-Francois Guérepi, whose attitudes were far more positive about Islam, and he's not a politician. So that interview was far better.
Are you talking about JF?
JF Guérepi, yeah, the Quebec
Yeah,
guy.
JF, the one who's French, right?
Yeah, he's
He's
Quebecois.
an
Yeah,
atheist.
yeah, yeah,
I only know him as JF because you said his whole name, but we would call him JF. He's the one who he married like a mentally handicapped person, right?
yeah. He's kind of got like the Scott Ritter Wikipedia problem. But yeah,
I first saw him on the Drunken Peasants podcast, maybe like 8, 9 years ago when TJ Kirk, the amazing atheist, still was with his old show before he split off into a before they split off the Drunken Peasant show from Ben,
mm,
and they had JF on, and that's where I first discovered him. His wife is missing, and there's all these funny conspiracies that he murdered her.
yeah,
so, so I saw that. So I saw Daniel talk to JF. Yeah, I remember that.
yeah. So that went far better. But I think in general, like, and then that got the ball rolling. And the next person who took the torch for that is Dilly Hussein. And I used to really, I didn't have the best opinion of Dilly Hussein, but I think my opinion of him has greatly improved since he's interviewed in succession 4 people from the far right. And
I've never watched any of his thing. I don't really know him, but I've seen the name on Twitter X.
Well, yeah, I mean, Twitter is like the worst space to actually put out your thoughts, and it attracts a whole bunch of trolls, like you said. But actually, sitting down with Nick Griffin, and Jada Franson, whose opinions on Islam actually improved in the last couple of years. Like I said, I don't think we should ally with these people, but I think it was a good thing that they actually reached out into new vistas and got away from the anti-Islam right and started interviewing people whose opinions on Islam were far more positive. um
Oh, okay.
so, and the red pill community, of course, too. I don't agree with everything with red pill either, but we have Sneeko and Andrew Tate, who converted to Islam. Like Muhammad Hijab just interviewed Pearl.
I
Um,
hate Pearl.
I'm not a fan either.
I write against her all the time. That's the only interview that I don't want to get sidetracked, but she didn't do it because she's curious about Islam. She wants like the whole I've documented and archived so many of her tweets. I know her. I study her as if she was a wild animal, and I'm like Jane Goodall with the gorilla. Like I watch her. I have an obsession and a deep hatred, a deep hatred. And I'll be open about that. So I know her very well, and what I know about her, studying her for years, she didn't do it because she's interested in Islam. She likes to be controversial. She
Yeah,
wants money. She's not monetized. She doesn't care what Brother Hijab has to say. She wants, she's interviewed red pill Muslims before. She wants to get the angle of the anti-woman angle
right.
because she's very anti-woman. It's her grift. She gets a lot of money from incels and MGTOW guys.
Mhm.
They seem to really think that Islam is like a very barbaric way to subjugate women,
Yeah,
and they want to hear a Muslim say like really dark stuff. And
yeah,
she was hoping to bait Muhammad Hijab into that, and he was super calm with her.
yeah,
But I know her angle. I know her angle. She's a modern woman. She's a dog mom. She's college educated. Her parents are rich. They're college educated. She was raised by a nanny. She doesn't have a family. She's 28 years old. She's not trad at all. She attacks so many Christian women on the right, so many all day. She can't really do that with the men in Islam, but what she can do is be passive, kind of tomboyish, kind of aloof and naive, and then get the money. It's about the money.
yeah.
The things she says are not genuine, and I've seen her run from debates. I've watched almost every single video criticizing her. Like I'm really unfamiliar with her. None of that crowd would join Islam, in my opinion, because they like Tawheed. They want to have the idea of the Playboy orgy scene. They like, oh, you can
Yes,
have four wives, so
yes.
we can be hedonists, and I can have four wives who have to shut up and just wear a burqa and never talk back to me, and I can beat them. Like, that's what I get. Oh, heck yeah, let me convert. She's not doing a service towards Muslim women. She's
Yeah,
doing a, uh, she didn't deserve that interview. She was not good enough to talk to Muhammad Hijab. That's how I look at it.
yeah.
She's like gutter. She's like Jerry Springer. You know,
Tell us how
she
you really feel,
hires.
Milan.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know, like, okay, maybe there are a couple people in her audience who are like, "Oh, I never heard of Muhammad Hijab. Let me check him out." Alhamdulillah, maybe some good will come from it. But you got to give dawah to everybody. I get
Yes.
it. Harun and Moses, right? They went to Fir'aun. But I think Pearly Things is a high level occultist. She hangs out with John Zerka, who's an open occultist and has slept with over 1,000 women, he claims. He's some pretty shady people.
Mm, mm.
I mean, people who don't practice what they preach, and I know that there's a clique there. They rotate, and it's about money. You have backdoor deals, okay? You do this for me, and we'll get money, and I'll give you this revenue, and
Mm.
she doesn't. She should have talked. If she was sincere, she would have talked to a sister.
Yes,
That's how I see it. Talk
that's a
to a
true point.
Muslima who can correct your fake views about Islam. Because when I watch Pearl's tweets, if you pay attention, not everyone can because they're not as obsessed and anal as me. But the rad fams will tell her, "Oh, you should just join Islam if you think like that." And it's like, whoa, 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 no, 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 no. Her ideas are not Islam, and I can prove it,
Right,
and I can show you. She doesn't represent us because
right.
they think that she represents, oh, women, like the things she says are like tropes. And remember, she cozied up to Nick Fuentes. She tried to get in with a countless other, like Tommy Robinson.
Yeah,
It's the money,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it helps. But her audience is borrowed from Rolo Tomasi, Fresh and Fit, and Sneeko, and Tate. So she don't have her own audience. She's borrowing from them, and
Right.
they already know about Brother Muhammad Hijab. You see what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
True.
But I
No,
get
I
your
agree.
point.
No,
I
no,
get
I
your
agree.
point.
Yeah. And when you pointed out one of the challenges that Islam for Europeans is going to encounter is that we're going to deal with a lot of white youth who are going to feel very disillusioned, and there things like red pill, white nationalist movements, or the far left are going to try to appeal to them. And all three of those have very toxic outcomes. And we want to present like an alternative approach to say, Islam is for you people as well. And but at the same time, like um there's like this, the genders couldn't be more like at each other's throats at this point. And we
Yeah.
don't want it to where we have brothers converting to Islam who are extreme right, like you said, like having all these opinions that are actually outside of Islam,
Exactly.
that are just like aberrations of our faith. And at the same time, you're going to have white women who are coming from a more leftist perspective. So how do you bridge that gap? That's going to be quite a challenge, because like I guess we're going to have to meet halfway and follow the dean the best way that we can, whether that's through marriage or just a regular interaction. So
I think it's doable. Everything you've said, I think that we gotta. To me, it sounds like you got a very good map, a blueprint of what you want. Now
yeah,
it's just about the logistics of it, getting
yes,
it down.
yes, and
You
that's
know,
going to take a lot of planning, a lot of people who know more stuff than I do. But as, like I said, the book is tantamount. Like that's going to be like you said, a blueprint in written form. Um, and I'm not a scholar either. I would love to have more time, to get a traditional Islamic scholarship. But at the same time, I have people who have more education than I do, that can make sure that what we're doing is, has its foundations in the Quran and Sunnah, inshallah. So
perfect. That sounds great.
yeah,
I think you have a wonderful seed that can grow into a mighty oak.
inshallah.
It's
Yeah,
hard to when someone is a visionary and there's people who they don't even want to think about something that ideal, that archetypical. You got to share big ideas with big-minded people.
mhm,
Like, if I was gonna go talk about like a new recipe with someone who doesn't like cooking, I'm not gonna benefit. They just want to eat the product. They don't want to hear about the process.
right.
So that's how I think that you should look at it. Because people are gonna cancel, people are gonna complain, but I mean, you gotta go for what you want to have your passion for. None of us know what ripple effect we're gonna have. And I
Yeah,
say, if you have a vision, you have a dream, you feel like this is right, and you feel like it can help, go for it. And don't let somebody pull you at your coattail. And some people are ankle biters and quite jealous. They don't want to be in your shadow. They don't want to. The higher you fly, the farther down they realize they are. And some people can't handle that type of existential crisis.
mm,
They can't deal with that. They can't cope. They're not visionaries, and they hate the eccentric mind or the visionary or the driven or the steadfast because they're maybe sloths internally. You know, I've I've um I've seen a lot of people who had great ideas and they just didn't go for it because they didn't have the right group to cheer them on. They needed a cheerleader. They needed a people to say, got it, go. You know, when you watch, I used to like to watch these bikers who go on these long marathons, mountains and like through streams, and it's a race, right? There's people who will show up just to ring a bell to cheer these bikers on, and you'd be surprised because they put a GoPro on their helmet, how they start picking up the pace just from those people ringing a bell and cheering them on.
mhm.
It's fascinating what the human mind can do when you think like how do they keep going? Like they're going through snow, like the air is really thin up there. I would have given up already,
Yeah,
but they hear a cheer and you can literally see them speed up. And then when they're kind of solo on their own, now without that support, they kind of slow down. But then they hear the cheering and oh, gotta get going again. So look at it that way, you know,
yes,
go
yeah.
for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I draw inspiration from Billy Bean, the general manager of the Oakland Athletics, who was the basis of the movie Moneyball with Brad Pitt. Have you seen that movie, Milahan?
Oh, no, I haven't seen it, no.
I
It's one
highly
of the few
recommend it.
Brad Pitt movies I haven't seen.
Yeah. But yeah, it's all about in the old days, the way they would have they would scout for baseball players is by a very old scout like method of like he's a five tools guy, like their weight, their height, like the way they carry themselves, the way they hit the ball, the sound the ball makes, totally unscientific stuff. And there was a guy by the name of Bill James who wrote a book called Sabermetrics, and it was a
Uh-huh.
method of using statistical analyses to find the best ball players. And he was ridiculed, absolutely ridiculed by the entire baseball community for decades. But it wasn't until like in the early 2000s when Billy Beane, who was the GM of the Oakland Athletics, wanted to institute this idea. So he brought in like statistical and analysts and people who bought into Bill James's methods, and they got a whole new roster, and everyone thought he was crazy. And they ended up winning like the same number of games that the Yankees did with like a quarter of the budget. And the
Wow.
Red Sox actually offered him to become the general manager, which he turned down. And 2 years later, the Red Sox, won their first World Series in like a century. And now every single sports organization, not just baseball, every single sports organization uses this method now. So
That
and
reminds me,
yeah,
yeah, that reminds me of a medical story I heard the other day where there was a doctor, I can't recall his name, but he noticed that there wasn't as much hand washing, and when they would try to deliver babies, they would one guy had touched a corpse, and they, went and then touched, went over to help deliver this baby. There was just too much cross contamination, and a lot of women were getting infections. And then later they started discovering more about hand washing and separating bodies, like, but he was ridiculed. He was actually placed in an insane asylum.
wow,
I
yeah,
wish I could. I gotta recall that. I listened to so many different medical podcasts, but oh man, that's a shame that I don't know remember his name.
yeah,
But basically, a lot of geniuses, a lot of visionaries, they get hard life. Like they have a hard life, or people don't accept them, or they don't listen. And so I'd say if you got some opposition, because look at who people praise. That's sometimes I think. Like, okay, look who's being praised and look who's totally just like outcasted. Who really is a better role model? Is it
hmm,
what the algorithm bumps up? Like, no. It's like we're at a digital warfare age, which is a bigger topic as well. And so if you can find a way to help Muslims and some groups are just upset and pissy about it, they'll answer for their deeds on Judgment Day, and everyone else will answer for theirs. So you don't know what Allah wants you to do. I'll share something with you that might motivate you. Brian Bazarzik, he has a Polish last name or something. I can't pronounce it. He has the Reptarium on YouTube. I watched his channel grow, where he started out breeding snakes and reptiles, and he would do educational videos like Steve Irwin type of stuff. Now he had a passion to create, to expand. He finally was in construction of his dream. He got cancer and died within 6 months.
hmm,
But now it's completed, and his children and his grandchildren are in it. And he didn't get to he struggled the whole way, got to the construction part, but didn't get to see it's finished. But guess what? The
hmm,
revenue, everything he built is now for his loving family. So he didn't know what was gonna happen, right? Like, am I ever gonna make it? Is this ever gonna come? He got an anaconda, he got all these different he got a albino crocodile, an albino alligator, two-headed snakes. He started getting very rare things. He expanded, his YouTube channel blew up, and then Allah called him back, you know? And
wow,
so think
yeah.
about it.
My wife, I'm gonna definitely tell my wife because she's a big fan of the Reptarium. We actually visited the Reptarium
Oh,
last year.
really? So
Yeah,
you know who I'm talking about?
know exactly who you're talking about.
Ah, there you go.
Subhanallah.
Hey, yeah, yeah.
I will definitely mention this to her.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Because when I saw his dying video, I was like, wow, so he worked so hard. I watched him back in the day. I remember just tiny little thing,
mm,
expand, 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 and then finally, boom, and that's to me, I'm like, wow, that's
yeah.
if you got it, go for it. But even if it's like the old saying we have in America, plant a tree, even though you're not going to be the one to enjoy the shade. And me, I like trees. You see these little tiny little saplings. They need two twigs they need two sticks to stand up straight.
Mhm.
and they had to suffer. Squirrels crawling on them, can bend it, stupid kids coming and beating them with sticks. That tree has to survive for so many years.
Mm,
Then one day it's huge and you can't even wrap your arms around it. You know,
mm.
that is basically every person's life if they have a mission, you
Yeah.
know? It's either be active or be passive. And when you're passive, you become treaded on, you know? Make your mark in the world. I'd say go for it. There's always people, and just please remember, people get paid now with the algorithms to have reactions, you know? If you ever feel bad, just look at how many people say really terrible things about Harry and Meghan of England. I don't know much about them. I bought his book. I haven't finished it yet. But people make money from like freaking out over anything and everything they do. And I thought to myself, wow, these people only exist just to mock Prince Harry and his wife.
Wow.
That's a rough life, you know. And he talks about mental health, but the higher you go, you know, those underneath really hate it, you
Mm.
know. And so keep going. And I'm excited for your mission. If I can help in any way in the future, you know, some kids programs, cooking programs or something American, you know, I'm up for it.
Well, what we're trying to do is, what we do want to do. One of the ideas I had in my head is a European or white American cookbook,
Oh, I would love that.
halal cookbook. Um,
Yeah, that
so
sounds fun.
yeah, I mean, like, we've been trying, and then we have a dearth of sisters at Islam for Europeans for the time being. We're trying to get more. There's a few sisters that have joined recently, but they definitely want to help out as well. I invented a card game years ago with my brother, and I'm just like, you know what? Why don't I just include the card game in my upcoming book? And that way, because it's a type of card game that takes a lot of skill, a lot of mental effort. It's a good mind game. So cards. Card games are interesting. I mean, they vary by culture. And like a lot of like if you talk to born Muslims a lot, if you ask them what euchre is, they have no idea what euchre is. I mean, like we played euchre all the time in high school, right? So I mean, like
Mhm.
card games are very specific, to the culture. So something like that, that's like becomes like part of like the culture itself, that has actually like positive things that come out of it, like chess. I think are a very good thing. But definitely, like if you want to work on the halal European cookbook, you're more than welcome to Milan.
I love cooking.
Yeah,
I literally cook so many things today. Like
well,
I'm
that's
always
good.
posting cooking stuff. And I go
Nice.
through vintage Americana cookbooks too.
Oh wow.
Like I have a vast library of vintage cookbooks and a lot of them are Christian, which is interesting.
Mhm,
You know, these
mhm.
old fashioned cookbooks, like they're like paper, you find them on Etsy, they're like $10 and it's filled with knowledge. I have a
Wow.
really, really old one that's like late 1890s, you know? Like it's really cool. It's just really awesome. The women before really pumped out great cooking stuff that we've lost today.
Yeah.
And
Unfortunately.
I think that Muslim women can definitely benefit from cooking
Mm.
because now the with the age of convenience, lesser cooking. So
Yeah.
food is medicine and food is culture.
Yes. Absolutely. 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 Um, yeah. I mean, I have these cheap meals that I created. Like I've created this dish called Parmesan hash browns. So the hash
Ooh,
brown patties, like they're like
yes.
oval shaped or square shaped.
Yeah.
You have those. You have those in America, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, what I'll do is I'll throw it in the oven at like 350 for like 10 minutes. I'll take it out, flip it, and then I'll add like pasta sauce, mozzarella cheese, uh, Parmesan oregano, and then put it back in, cook it for another 10-15 minutes. So it's like chicken Parmesan, but with a hash brown instead. So it's very
Nice.
cheap and easy to make, and it's that's one of the things I might want to include in my book.
Yeah. And also you can get those Yukon Gold potatoes.
Yeah.
You boil them for like 15, 20 minutes and then shred them, add an egg, a little bit of flour and some salt. You can make like those potato pancakes in the shape of an oval as well.
Yes, plenty of ideas, plenty of ideas. So,
Nice.
yeah, did you have anything else to add, Milan? This was a wonderful interview. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Yeah, I enjoyed it. Yeah, I think you got most of my questions down that I'm very curious about. I really hope to see what you do with it. I really am excited to see how it goes, and I'd say just keep on keeping on. If the train stopped for every goose that honked, you can't get to your destination, you know?
That's wonderful. Yeah, and, this is great, cross, channel, like meeting of minds too, Milahan. Like, hopefully, inshallah, like people who subscribe to I4E, who watch my videos, they'll subscribe to your channel, and vice versa. And not just that, but it's a good to talk to like-minded people who have, who have different ideas, and see issues or problems that the Muslim community is facing, and proposing different ideas to solve that. So
Yes, yes, definitely. And I've created playlists, like I come from the culinary arts restaurant background. And I say if you convert to Islam as a revert, how can you best navigate that situation before you can get a husband who can retire you from the workforce? How can you dress? How can you act? What can you do? These small steps.
mm,
Someone of another culture may say, "Oh, well, just quit automatically and show up in a niqab." There's a way that you can do this in your job and to ease your way out where you don't harm your resume, you
that's
know?
true.
And so
Wow.
I've created quite a lot of information for people on my vlog playlists in case they're interested.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm all about solutions. And if anyone goes through my playlists, the vlog ones, I have hundreds, they'll see that I talk about very niche topics, but someone's got to